Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Jonathan Holmes here, back again on the Fun and Games Side Quest podcast. So flattered to be a part of it yet again. I asked, can I come back on? And the creators of the show said, sure. So kind of them. Last time I was on the show, I talked about Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, a Commodore 64 game I bought with my own money as a child about a bachelor, a strange man named Zach McCracken. And I think, if I remember correctly, when I did this episode, I even mentioned Travis Touchdown, who I'll be talking about on this episode of the show, because there's something about these alliterative named heroes in games that symbolize a sort of magical realism. They seem almost too good to be true, too weird to be true, and yet are still grounded in some of the same situations that we experience in real life. And that's my definition of magical realism. Oof, we're already on a tear, aren't we? This is a tangent as we speak. Am I going to be able to keep this one to just 20 minutes? I hope so. Whoop, let me take a look at the clock. 1:25 it says. So I'm going to give myself until 1:45 to wrap this up. That's what I talked about last time. Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders. Look it up. Read about it. What an amazing game. An equally amazing game, maybe more amazing in some ways, at least to me. No More Heroes 3. That's the game I'm going to be talking about today. But a little bit more about myself before I forget. I write for Destructoid.com, where I reviewed No More Heroes 1 years and years ago, alongside Anthony Birch, who later worked on the Borderlands games. Weirdly enough, No More Heroes 3 has a character that was designed by one of the Borderlands artists. So, small world, plenty of crossover potential in all the things that are going on with all of us. And that's a big part of what No More Heroes 3 is actually about. Crossing over and finding out that there's more than you thought in terms of connections between things that you hadn't considered before. Getting ahead of myself again. I also write for Nintendo Force magazine. I write for Lost in Cult's Lock On series of game magazine books. And I'm a part of two different podcasts, at least two. One of them talking to women about video games, and the other Boston's Favorite Son, where my friends Stephanie Sterling and Conrad Zimmerman come up with terrible ideas for me that have no mainstream potential for success in order to make me famous again. But it's not going to work. No More Heroes 3 is like one long Boston's Favorite Son sketch in many, many ways. It is a game that when you're playing it, you think, how did they get this made? This was never going to make any sense to anybody. And that's part of what I love about it. Suda51 in general has this knack for somehow getting big publishers to pay him money to make games that are never going to make sense to your average person. And the fact that they even exist is in itself a gift. It opens up the potential for anything to happen. I love Suda51's games. I played just about all of them up until No More Heroes 3. So you'd think I'd know what to expect. Nope. Totally wowed. Couldn't believe my eyes. I think the game itself has like 3 different title sequences where it says No More Heroes 3 and the music plays and colors swirl and you're like, that's it. No More Heroes 3. I figured that's what I was playing because that's the game I bought. And I asked for it by name at the store, or I downloaded it from the shop and saw the name. So, yep, No More Heroes 3. Get it. Do a little bit more playing of the game. Then guess what? No More Heroes 3. It just says it again. They were so excited that they got to make No More Heroes 3. Because for a long time, they didn't think they would get to do it. I had interviewed Suda51 several times about Lollipop Chainsaw, about Shadows of the Damned, about Let It Die. After No More Heroes 2 was released, all of those games. Even Travis Strikes Again, I talked to him about that, which is actually the 3rd game in the No More Heroes series. But that's typical Suda51 trickiness. He calls the 4th game in the series No More Heroes 3 because you think you know what's going on, but you actually don't. There's always a little twist with everything he comes up with. So, like I was saying, I had interviewed him several times in between the release of No More Heroes 2 and No More Heroes 3 and saying, is the 3rd game going to happen? And he always said he wanted it to, but he wasn't sure. And that's because, well, the No More Heroes games, very well known. Travis Touchdown is a commonly discussed and understood character, making the names, making it onto the list of names of various video game characters of the year a lot of the time. I think Game Informer even said he was one of the biggest dorks in gaming ever. They did a sort of a mean list of characters they didn't like. They named Travis. And the reason for that, if you ask me, is because Travis Touchdown as a character hits too close to home for nerds who don't accept the fact that they're nerds. Travis Touchdown loves video games, loves Japanese cartoons, terrible social skills, horny, stupid, funny. You laugh at him, you laugh with him. In many ways, he's sort of a modern Butthead of Beavis and Butthead fame. But in the, again, typical Suda51 style, crass, dumb jokes, knowingly dumb, knowingly juvenile, to the point where he actually named a character in the No More Heroes series Dr. Juvenile, and that character is a self-insert because Dr. Juvenile made a game that was Shadows of the Damned, EA's published game from a while back on the PS3 360 that's about to be remastered for modern consoles. Dr. Juvenile made the exact same game as featured in Travis Strikes Again, the third game in the series. I digress again. Woof, tangents. So Suda51 has a way of taking these crass jokes and simple, base level, instinctually fun elements like just wanton violence. Games have so much blood, so much violence, to the point where it's almost self-parody. And I think that Suda loves playing with the idea that he'll make fun of himself in his own work, and the fact that he is just a primitive human being, but he's sophisticated enough to know that and poke fun at himself and sometimes potentially other people in the process. He really sticks it to AAA game developers in No More Heroes 3, with the main antagonist of the game, Damien Riccatello, being named after the former head of EA, if I remember correctly. So, again, a little bit of tangent, but the point I'm going to make now, I'll announce the point so I actually make it. We'll see if that works. Is that Suda51 loves flattening things out and bringing you high art, fine art, symbolism, surrealism, along with that crass baseness, that low art I was talking about before. There's this whole concept called super flat that has been around for a long time, but I don't think it was actually named super flat until fine artist Takashi Murakami called it that. Takashi Murakami came up with this term, super flat. It means both art that looks flat, that is simple colors, doesn't go for like a painterly realism, instead goes for iconic symbolism with characters that as soon as you look at them, you understand what they are. Now, go read Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud if you haven't heard of this concept before. But there's this idea that when you make characters more realistic, they no longer resonate with people in the same iconic way. So when I look at a realistic human face, I don't see myself potentially in that face. I see the details of somebody else's face, and they truly feel like an other. Whereas when I look at a smiley face drawing or Charlie Brown or Garfield, any of these simple flat characters, your brain can look at that and recognize, well, maybe that's me, because I also have eyes and a mouth. So does the smiley face. Therefore, that smiley face could be me. If I look at a realistic picture of Channing Tatum, I know I'm not Channing Tatum, folks. I haven't got an ounce of Tatum face or bod going on at all. Tatum is a superior alpha male compared to me, whereas a smiley face, that could be me. That kind of iconography is a big part of super flat, as well as is flattening the barriers, flattening the hierarchy between high art and low art. And I don't like really using those terms anyway, because I think it's mean to call certain art forms lower than others, but you get the general idea. There is art that is considered more sophisticated, more intentional about trying to activate the frontal lobe of your brain and get you thinking and feeling things, changing your life, making you cry, blah, blah, blah. And then there's just ass and farts and chopping off heads and screaming and falling down, pratfalls, pie in the face. That's the more low art stuff. Suda51 loves combining all of that and combining different aspects of the art world. He gets fine artists to get involved with his games all the time, while still making them games that, and I've talked to him about this, so I know, he's really thinking that these games of his are going to be potential mainstream hits. Suda51's super weird, but he's not trying to alienate anyone. He truly believes that if he puts his heart into his games, lets his mind wander, and come up with new ideas that we've never seen before in games, opens himself up to creativity without too much self-editing, lets himself free associate with his creative process, that's going to create deep and meaningful work that will resonate with people. And he's right. He has a huge, passionate fan base. It's just not as big as Hideo Kojima's fan base or Neil Druckmann's fan base or any of these other bigger name game directors. Suda51's expressing what's inside him all the time. One time, he did a promotional video, I think it was for No More Heroes 2, where he's just on the toilet talking about how he has to poop and how his whole creative process is like getting his poops out. So that says it better than I ever could. And that's probably what Travis Touchdown is most famous for, is in his games, when you have to save, you go to the toilet and poop. And that's like depositing your data into the mainframe, into the save disk or whatever, is like putting a poop in the potty. So Travis Touchdown, I'll talk about him real quick because it makes more sense to understand what is so special about No More Heroes 3 if you know a little bit about Travis. Travis started off No More Heroes 1, and as I wrote for Limited Run Games, who re-released No More Heroes 1 with a collector's edition, including a behind-the-scenes book that they invited me to write an essay for, and I'm still flattered by. No More Heroes 1, the undercurrent of that game is all about Eric Erickson's his fourth stage, maybe? Eric Erickson has these 8 stages of psychological development. And one of the middle stages, is identity versus role confusion. And that's what No More Heroes is all about to me. Perfect game for people who love video games, who are older and wondering, who am I? What's going on? Who am I when I play a video game? Am I still me, or do I take on the persona of the character? Why do I want to play video games, even though I'm old? People tell me video games are just for kids, and here I am in my 30s still playing them. No More Heroes really resonated with people on those levels. And the first game, I think, is still the most financially successful of the whole series. It was also a real right place, right time game where it was an M-rated game that was funny and silly, that used the Wii remote in a novel way that wasn't too intrusive. It wasn't all motion controlled swinging like in Skyward Sword or whatnot. It was motion enhanced controls where if you lift the Wii remote up, you do high attacks. If you let it drag low, you do low attacks. A lot of dick jokes in there. The Wii remote, you toss it, I guess you could say, in order to charge it. Really looks like a masturbation motion, folks. And they knew it. They knew you were going to look like you were masturbating a phallic object when you charge that up. And also, I don't think this was intentional, but going between high and low as you play it is what it's all about, which ties perfectly with the fact that the game series goes in between high art surrealism and symbolism and low art dick and sex jokes and tons of wanton, mindless feeling violence at the drop of a hat. So that's No More Heroes 1. No More Heroes 2 gets into Erickson's next stage of development, which is intimacy versus isolation. It's all about Travis deciding, am I going to be isolated and just focus on anger and revenge, or am I going to actually invite people into my life and find intimacy and love and friendship and whatnot? And am I going to be the opposite of a evil billionaire who only cares about proving he's better than other people? That's a theme that stays with No More Heroes into the next few games. But that's No More Heroes 2 in a nutshell. No More Heroes 3 gets into Ericsson's next stage, which is generativity versus stagnation. And Travis is living in a trailer at that point out in the woods and just sitting around playing video games. Older now, because the games take place chronologically in time. So, it was about 10 years later that No More Heroes Travis Strikes Again came out, 10 years after the first game, so Travis is 10 years older. You find out later that he has kids, that he's not really parenting and not really engaged with adult life. He's caught up in those video games. You also find out that Travis comes to care about a game developer named Dr. Juvenile, who is definitely a self-insert of Suda51, because in Travis Strikes Again, Dr. Juvenile made a game that is essentially Shadows of the Damned, a game that Suda worked on for EA years ago, and there's a bunch of emotions tied up in that. So Suda making a game about his attempts to be generative and create games versus his urge to just stagnate and goof around. Travis, a killer in this game. Well, he spends most of the time playing video games, so when you kill games in the game, kill in-game characters in the game, you're not really killing living things, which is kind of a change for the series. But through his playing of video games, Travis actually brings someone back to life. I don't want to spoil it, but that's the ultimate act of generativity. Travis creating life, or at least bringing life back to someone who he had taken it from in a prior game. It is a true heel face turn. Travis becomes the life giver, which brings us to the fourth game of the series, No More Heroes 3, which picks up almost directly after Travis Strikes Again, where Travis is now in the stage of integrity versus despair. And this is something that nobody has talked about ever that I've seen. I seem to be the only person who sees the No More Heroes games line up directly with Ericsson's stages of identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, stagnation versus generativity, and then the final stage, integrity versus despair, which is the stage we're all supposed to go through before we die, and we're looking back in our life thinking, did I do good or did I suck? Was I awful? No More Heroes 3 is said to be the final game in the series, so it is Travis's pre-death game. Not to spoil it, but Travis does die in the game and then meets Takashi Miike, film director, who, again, another master of high art symbolism and then low art goofy jokes and zombie musical comedies. Takashi Miike, look up his filmography if you're interested, and truly one of the most interesting avant-garde and yet still mainstream successful, at least in Japan, directors going today. Takashi Miike plays himself in No More Heroes 3 and shows up and talks to Travis after his resurrection. How do I even begin to explain No More Heroes 3? And I'm almost out of time. I said I'd limit myself to 20 minutes. How am I doing? I think I have 3 minutes. Oh, geez. Well, I tried. And that's what Suda51 does. He puts himself out there. He lets himself free associate, just as I am, with his game development. And he tries. And sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't. But it's always genuine. And it's always sincere. And No More Heroes 3, so many moments in it that I'm frankly shocked didn't make more headlines. You see websites, Polygon, Kotaku, Destructoid, talking about the social significance of games, the meaning behind games, how games are progressive, how games are more inclusive or not inclusive. For some reason, No More Heroes 3, people just slept on it. I have to guess that it's because it was so strange that people just bounced off it. Sometimes when games are really weird, people think, well, this developer is just being weird for weird's sake, so there's nothing meaningful here. Travis Touchdown wears a sweatshirt that says "fuck racism" in it. When's the last time you saw something like that? When's the last time you saw Nathan Drake actually make a political statement like that? And it shouldn't be political to say "fuck racism," but it is, in fact, controversial among some circles to say that racism is real and racism is bad. Travis Touchdown making a firm statement on that. So much integrity that this terrible person who's done all these murders in the past, ends up having in his final game. No More Heroes 3 is about being a good person, trying to make the world a better place, being stuck with who you are, still making terrible mistakes. Travis kills a woman, Kimmy Howell, who in this game actually has a redesign by the designer of Bayonetta. And I should be remiss without saying that the No More Heroes series, particularly No More Heroes 3, has amazing character designs. They've got a fine artist who created the characters for in-game game called Deathman that Travis plays and reminisces about how much he loves games. And that's how the game starts off, by playing a game within a game called Deathman. They've got a character designer who later worked on the Fire Emblem series and helped that series to blow up and get big with Fire Emblem Awakening. And I believe that artist, their name is escaping me, but they also worked on Pokemon. So it's like the finest pedigree of artists. As I mentioned, I think before, one of the artists from Borderlands designed a character for No More Heroes 3. It's a true amalgamation of some of the best artists in both fine arts and in the game sphere working together. Why wasn't No More Heroes 3 more popular? The combat is really good. Past games in the No More Heroes series, people would be like, it's all right, but it's a little shallow compared to Bayonetta or Devil May Cry or these other character action games. No More Heroes 3, while not quite as complicated as Bayonetta, it's pretty deep. Travis now has a glove called the Death Glove that has actual Switch controllers in it, the Joy-Cons. They just stuck them in there. Nintendo, for some reason, maybe it's because No More Heroes was such a pivotal Wii game that showed that the Wii wasn't just party games and family-friendly games. It showed that it could make games for a different audience as well. Maybe that's why Nintendo has a soft spot for Travis, because they did put a Travis Touchdown skin in Smash Brothers Ultimate. There's No More Heroes Spirits in Smash Brothers Ultimate, and No More Heroes 3 ends with a direct Smash Brothers reference. And before I forget, Epona, the pony from Legend of Zelda series, is a main character in parts of Travis Strikes Again. And Travis rides Epona to go fight Dracula. This series, folks, where do I even start? I've already started. How do I even end is what I should say, because, geez, I'm over time. I said I would give myself 20 minutes. I think I'm at 22. I'll sum up by saying I love No More Heroes 3. If you like action games, if you like surprising games, you gotta like weird games, though. If you don't like weird games, if you want things to just be, I'm a guy in a city, I'm running around. Sorry, Grand Theft Auto. I know you're good, but you don't have too many surprises. If you've seen a Quentin Tarantino movie, you pretty much know the tone and feel you're going to get from Grand Theft Auto for the most part. No More Heroes 3, better than Grand Theft Auto, at least for me. Boy, does it throw you those curveballs left and right. So filled with surprises, so filled with fun, so filled with mixing that high and low art stuff that I love so much, giving me a guttural, visceral, violent experience 1 second, then making me question the meaning of existence and humanity the next. And the real thing that tugs at my heartstrings about No More Heroes 3 is that it still feels unfinished in a way that is so honest and real to how things actually go. Suda wanted to do so much more with the game, but I think he ran out of money. If you play a hacked version of the game, there's actually parts of the overworld you can go to that are fleshed out in there, but he didn't get to put content in them because we have to guess that they ran out of time and budget. So that feeling that there's still more to explore, and boy, oh boy, does Travis end things on a cliffhanger with No More Heroes 3. Not to spoil it, but they super duper set up a sequel that's probably never going to happen. That feeling that there is another mystery just around the corner that maybe you'll discover and maybe you won't, but that urge to discover it is there because there's more to understand. There's more to mentally explore. There's more to analyze. No More Heroes 3 came out years ago. I'm still analyzing it and coming up with a better understanding of what it means to me and whether Suda51 meant what it means to me or not. I don't know whether he intended for those meanings to come across, or whether I'm just finding them there like looking at a Rorschach test and seeing symbolism where it's only resonating with my unique brain. I don't know. But I do know that being able to entertain my mind by seemingly endlessly giving me questions to try to answer and rocks to uncover, rocks to turn over and see what's lying beneath in both my own subconscious and in what is planted into the game is just such a treasure and a treat. So thank you, Suda51. Thank you for listening to this super long episode of the show. Sorry, I just can't stop talking about No More Heroes 3. Check it out. Check me out on Twitter, if you're still on there, at NonTrotsky. Check me out on Destructoid. Check me out on Nintendo Force. Check out Lock On Magazine. Check out Talking to Women About Video Games podcast, and check out Boston's Favorite Son. And happy gaming, everyone.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.